Good evening, everyone. I want to start by remembering a moment, a snapshot in time that changed everything for me. I'm standing in my living room, holding a piece of paper. At the top is my name, and that's as personal as it gets. It begins unfortunately. Now that word has permeated and shaped my life up to this point. I hate it. A word that rubs salt in the wounds of an unfortunate kid with an unfortunate start. A word that often indicates a future bereft of fortune and predicted misfortune. Unfortunately, your application to study at college has been unsuccessful. Well, if you've ever experienced rejection, you know that gut-wrenching feeling, that sinking, spirit-crushing sensation as your dreams slip through your fingers. For me, this wasn't just another rejection. This was a retelling of mistruths I have heard my entire life. I'm not good enough. I'm not appropriate. I'm not wanted. And here it is, before my eyes, written in ink, I was written off. Let me take you back 24 years before this moment, where it all started. I was born on a council estate in Northampton. My father was Pakistani, and my mother English. For both of my parents' families, my very existence was problematic. My father's family were appalled that he had a child with a white one. And my mother's family were appalled that she had had a child with an Asian man. And this tension tore a lesion between my parents and resulted in a broken home. And I felt responsible for that. I internalized that as a youngster. I felt responsible. That meant I hated myself and generated self-loathing from an early age. My mum raised me as a single mother, with the stigma that carried, as well as being a single mother of a brown child. Things were challenging, and unfortunately, my home life was not always safe. In this tumultuous environment, I struggled. I struggled with my behaviour. I struggled at school. However, I was actually a smart kid. I was bright, energetic. I spoke my first words at 8 months. I walked at 9. I had Mensa level IQ, according to my doctor. And yet, by age 8, I couldn't read. Why? Well, somewhere in this tumultuous background that I was experiencing, I developed ADHD. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stop interrupting. Couldn't stop questioning. Now, me and my mum had struggled to bond. She admitted that she hadn't hugged me until I was 14 years old. And I had a doctor's note in my medical records that said I need to learn to develop friendships without excessive hugging and kissing of others. I was searching for connection at every step. But teachers didn't see that. They didn't see me yearning to connect, being enthusiastic, curious, trying to learn. They saw someone who was disruptive, who was naughty. They would place me in long internal exclusions. And I would sit in a room on my own. I couldn't read. So all I would do is play with pencils, pretend that they were submarines. I would look out the window, see my peers playing at playtime. I wasn't allowed to join them. And there was a clock on the wall. And I used to look at it and make deals with God. The next time I look at it, the time has gone forward. But it never did. Despite all this, one teacher saw me, and she refused to write me off. She realized I couldn't read my own name. She took me under her wing, and she taught me how to read from the very basics of phonics. That letters together make sounds. Blew my mind. Within a week, she taught me to read. And I went straight in at a high level. The first book I ever read was about cholera in Victorian Britain, and from that moment, my interest and passion for history was ignited. And now, everything changed for me at school. They would put me on a desk in the corner of the classroom, and I could finally utilize my ADHD as a superpower it really was. I would get in depth into different historical studies and moments and civilizations. I would read, write, make models. But no longer was I disruptive. No longer was I a problem. I could lose myself in different civilizations. I was able to access escapism. When I went to secondary school, this changed again. The school, and indeed the education system as it is often not equipped for young people with ADHD, particularly those that have experienced trauma. And they wanted me to conform again. Sit on the desk, look forward, put my hand up. I struggled. Things weren't better at home. My reputation as a naughty kid returned, and so did the sanctions and the punishments. This time it intensified. Racism intensified towards me, and I got blamed for things I didn't do. At the end of the year, they pulled me into an office, and they said, I'm not welcome back after the summer term. That I was being permanently excluded, and that I was going to a place called a pupil referral unit. I felt deep shame. I was being removed from my community, from my peers, and sent to a place that I didn't even understand. Let me share with you some grim statistics about school exclusion. Over half of the prison population in the United Kingdom were permanently excluded from school. 85% of people in young offenders institutes were also permanently excluded from school. And less than 1% get a pass in either English or maths. My future, statistically, was about to be defined for me in very narrow terms. And when I got there, it was a shock. The fences were 60 feet high. Before I would go into another room, they would have to lock the door behind me. Shocking. It was not an intellectual challenge either. They would disinterestedly throw worksheets at me. Now, I felt those worksheets were an insult to my intelligence, and yet my humanities teacher said to me, you will never amount to anything. Statistically, she may have been right, but I wasn't willing to accept that. I wanted another crack of the whip. So I would go to the headmaster's office, forcing my way in, and I would advocate for myself to have another go. They were like parole meetings for me. I would say, look, okay, I know I've done wrong, but I see the error now. Please let me have a future. Each time I was denied. And this in education is what we call the contagion theory. I had emotional behavioural difficulties. And so the theory was that if you put me with other young people that didn't have that, I would somehow infect them with those, regardless of their home life. So I was left with an indefinite sentence. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do the GCSEs required to get myself to A-levels. Suddenly, I'm on a very different timeline to my mainstream peers. Despite this, I refused to not have access to learning. They would put me in the IT suite all day and just leave me there whilst they dealt with the other young people. And I went on a journey of self-directed learning. I looked for my identity. I studied Eastern religions. The history of hip-hop. Artists like Public Enemy inspired me. I researched the Black Civil Rights Movement, speeches of Malcolm X by any means necessary. And it inspired me. The Black Civil Rights Movement was not my struggle, but it was the first time I saw people of colour, people who were being racially abused, refuse to be written in the way that they were writing them, and they redefined narratives in a beautiful way. And that always stuck with me. Despite this, I left that pupil referral unit at 16 with no qualifications at all. Life was hard for me. I was depressed. I worked in a supermarket to make ends meet. People would even mock me because I didn't have GCSEs. I felt shamed. I would drink energy drinks and play video games to the early hours of the morning. I couldn't have relationships with anybody because my self-worth was so low, I didn't think that I was worthy of their friendship or connection. But one friend invited me to do something different. He invited me to a martial arts class, and that changed everything. I experienced community, discipline, and I noticed that through effort I could improve and my hands could change outcomes. But crucially, the coaches had great expectations of me. They said if you work hard, you could go as far as you want. This was amazing. Now there's two academics called Harrison and Waller, and they've done some research on the aspirations of disadvantaged young people. And it really struck me when I read this. They said that the aspirations of disadvantaged young people are not necessarily lacking, but is often limited by the normative expectations of the adults surrounding them. And now, coming from a place where my family and the peers in my community were racially abusive to me and thought I was nothing and not worthy of their company, to teachers who were writing me off and telling me I would never amount to anything, suddenly I'm surrounded by coaches that could believe in me. And I realised for myself, the sky was the limit. I learnt new things about myself. I'll give you an example. So in one bout, I'm in a cage, and very early in the fight, I get slammed on my head. The guy puts me in a submission called an armbar. If I don't tap out, my arm is going to break. Now, I don't recommend anybody does this if you undertake the sport, but I refuse to tap out. I remember the voice in my head, it's too soon, it's too early, I've worked too hard for this. When my arm breaks, it will be limp enough for me to pull out and I will hit him with my other arm. That was the decision I made, I wasn't giving up. Luckily, the referee saved me from myself that night. He stopped the fight anyway. But I learned something about myself. I learned about resilience, and I learned how far I was willing to go to succeed. In another bout, similarly, I got slammed. And I spent all of the rounds being beaten. There was blood all over my face. It was a real thrashing. And in the last few seconds, I remember thinking to myself exactly this: I can't be bothered to go home and explain to people that I've lost this fight. Perhaps then they would write me off. They would write me off my future and my career. They might even lose interest in me as a person. And I pulled something out of myself. I turned him over, hit him a few times, put him in a choke, and won the fight. Now, all three of the judges that were scoring that fight might as well have thrown their score sheets away. There was no way, mathematically, that I was going to be able to get enough points in the time that was given. But I wasn't keeping their score. This time, I made the clock work for me. And so, with all this evidence of what I was capable of, we come back to the living room. And I'm looking at this piece of paper, and yes, I know that my academic record isn't great. I know that my resume isn't great. But I know I have the capability. I know this is my time. And I'm refusing to go down without a fight. I'm refusing to be written off. So I march down to the college. I've put on a suit. I'm raring to go. I find the one in charge of the course, and I ask her to give me an offer. And she sees a willingness and a determination in me that cannot be scribed. And she gives me that offer unconditionally. And I was going to seize that opportunity with both hands. I would have given anything to get on that course. And how amazing it was when I'm on an access course with other mature learners who similarly had been written off from education in different ways. And we were excited of what university would be like and who we would be on the other side. I still interrupted mind and they'd say, anyone but Thierry, answer the next question. But I was thriving in learning and was celebrated for that rather than demonized. And I was very fortunate. I got into the University of Warwick. And that was still challenging because I had to learn grammar whilst there. My first essay was pulled up. The grammar's awful. I didn't know what she meant. I've never been taught grammar in my life. Some of my peers, their pedigree was impressive. They've been to well-known boarding schools and private schools. I had to play catch-up while I was here, but I still did it. In my second year, things got trickier. My father had got back in touch with me. He was really proud of me, but he died. I really didn't want to stay at university. But a professor here believed in me. He had high expectations of me. And he said, I think you ought to apply to Cambridge for a master's. And I couldn't believe it. Me? Go to Cambridge? Wow. So I stayed. I stayed here learning because he gave me something to lose. Something to aim at too. I got the grade. I got a first-class honours degree here. And in one module I got 94%. But I didn't get into Cambridge. But I did get into St Andrews. And that has a beach, so it's a win. When I was at St Andrews, again, I wanted to stick it to Cambridge a bit, and I wanted to refuse to lose, so I applied to Oxford. And I got in, and I knew that moment was bigger than me. I'd proved that teacher wrong. I was going to amount to something. I'd proved the statistics wrong. There was no data for excluded children going to higher education. It's as if we didn't exist in that space. Now I knew we did, and I showed that. That's why I founded Excluded From School. We are dedicated to changing those statistics, improving the outcomes of young people excluded from school or at risk of school exclusion. We want to change the nature of school exclusion in the UK. We don't think the word should even be used. We mentor young people and we train educators to see potential where they may see a problem. One example, a young girl that we helped recently, similarly, she was denied access to a course because she didn't have a functional maths qualification. We knew that she had that capability, so we advocated for her. And she was accepted onto the course to study the maths alongside. Someone from a marginalised background, very underrepresented in different educational sectors, has now been given the opportunity to secure her financial security moving forward. We've proven again that we can rewrite the narratives that society unfairly imposes on us. After experiencing trauma, racism, and abuse, and being told I would never amount to anything, people wrote me off. At times, I even wrote myself off. But I developed skills in unlikely places. After all, it was a cage that led me to the university. And whilst I was at university, I had to learn grammar there. Not the best place to be learning grammar at that stage. But I did it. It was here at this university where I truly understood when in a seminar I learned that Jean-Paul Sartre had said that the French were never freer than under the German occupation. Because when people control our narrative, absolutely, we truly, truly gain the freedom to refuse and rewrite our own story. So I say to you, this is your time. Strip back the negative expectations that people have had for you or your self-limiting beliefs. If you've had a bad experience or you regret your background in education and you think, what if? Start writing that if. Go back to education. Go back to your dreams. If I can succeed there, so can you. All you have to do is refuse to be written off. Thank you.